All right. So I have a thing for press-a-feet. I actually approached Bernina in 96. I was hired for January 1st, 97 is when I started at Bernina. I had no gray hair back then. These are Bernina highlights. And I approached them with a press-a-foot project, not knowing they had started what was features. Remember the features binders before the Big Book of Feet? So what I suggested was verbatim what they were doing. But I didn't know. That was an in-house secret project. So they brought me in, interviewed me. I was their first webmaster, and the rest is history. So I still have a thing for press-a-feet. I started doing videos during COVID, and I remembered last month, I suggested to do those videos in 96. It took only 24 years to get approved. But a sewing machine, regardless of a baby 3 Series Bernina or anything really to a flagship like this, is only as good as the press-a-foot and the needle you put on. I call it the golden rule of the press-a-foot. At the stitching point, you don't want your fingers there. How many of you have sewn to a finger before? Yeah, you know what's spooky? Is like a minute or so later, when you're over the first shock, your brain knows how many times the needle went in. Yeah, you don't want that to happen again. So at the stitching point is the press-a-foot that governs the fabric. So I'm going to give you a variety of techniques that you can use today, and why a certain type of foot is useful and better than the generic, let's say, number 1 foot that we have that comes with the machine. So it's all little samples, no big project. I will just go through the list as I go on. So I'm starting with, this machine has dual feed. It still comes with a regular foot that doesn't do dual feed. Doesn't have that little mini walking foot from the top. It is still legal to sew with that foot. But since I have dual feet, and for what I'm doing, I will use it. So when you put a foot on, I like the Bernina feet for this. You just clamp them on, engage the dual feed, and then I'm good to go. I could select the foot on the machine if I wanted to. If a foot is restrictive, has metal on, the zipper foot puts steel between the needle and the fabric, you want to make sure that the machine stays clear of it. So in that case, I would select the foot. This is a wide opening foot. I don't really have to. So it's really up to you. But it's a safety feature if you select the press-a-foot as you go. So I'm going to take 2 layers and do a regular seam. And when something goes wrong, what are the first words in 17 languages? Your native language is not English, right? What's your native language? Russian. Okay. Mine is French. I speak French in 3 languages. Sometimes at the same time. So if something goes wrong, it's the machine, right? I teach a boot camp 4 days. Halfway through the first day, starts working. And then it's the machine, right? So we have a gag running for 4 days on this. So I'm going to sew. This is, I have to adapt a little bit here. This is not my usual sitting station. So I'm going to sew down. We turned off the light here because the camera, washes out. But this has bright lighting. There's I think over 90 LEDs. And they even put lighting on here so there's no shadows. But the cameras don't like this. So on the small machines, sometimes we have to put gaffer tape to hide the lights. All right, I'm going to just sew this down. And it's initializing right now. It's calibrating itself before it sews. And there's a bunch of stuff. And I'm going to go. Notice it's feeding straight through without doing anything. I'm going to cut. And then you do 2 layers of, this is like a muslin, a heavyweight muslin. It's pretty much like a quilting cotton. So that looks just fine. It could be the stitch length you use. How many of you are quilters? Okay. Also known as fabric, aka crack junkies. So this would look fine, right, when I sew this. But then I go, let's say, to a triple stitch. Okay, how many of you have done garments? If you learn to sew on garments, you know everything, right? Quilting is damn, that's 10%, that's easy, right? It doesn't have to fit anymore, right? So I'll come back to fit later. So I do a triple stitch. So I'm going to sew this down. And then on same fabric, same needle, same thread, I'm using Metler polyester thread, sewing thread. I sew with polyester thread, and I was not looking at what I was doing, so my seam is not exactly where I would normally put it. But you can see on the front, it's puckered, right? See this? It's puckered, right? And you go how do we say it? What's wrong with my machine? Right? So this is a triple stitch. The tug is way too much for this weight of fabric. Typically, your sewing thread, how many of you sew with Orifil? Quilters? Have you noticed that thread is thicker than the warp and weft thread in your fabric, right? So if you do even a straight stitch, in the boot camp, there's a video on Facebook, Bernina USA, on calibrating the stitch length for your cotton. And if you do the stitch too long, it starts gathering because the thread is stronger than the fabric threads. So here I had a double yank, for a triple stitch, and that puckered it up. Even a honeycomb stitch, I can just do a couple of inches of that. Even a honeycomb stitch will pucker a little bit. Not so bad, but it will have a little pucker. Can we see? Yeah. Okay, a little bit, tiny bit. It would press out. And then you wear the garment or the whatever, it was a trim, it'd be on a yoke, and then it comes back. Every time he comes out of the dryer, he's puckered, right? So if it's something that's going to be decorative, lower the thread tension. You want the thread to wrap under. It's not a structural seam anymore. You want, like embroidery, right? Embroidery always wrap under a little bit. You want it party on top, and the bottom will pull under. That way, it's not so tight as to pucker things up. So you could loosen that up, if you want. I hem my jeans with embroidery thread, right? It flows well. It's polyester, and that heavy, that heavy gold thread is nasty. If you look at your commercial jeans that you bought, flip the bottom, and where they stop the seam with the heavy thread on an industrial machine, it looks like, the French word is caca. You have to say it that way too. Sounds fancy. So it looks like caca, right? Because that thread doesn't behave. So with triple stitch on with the decorative stitch, the embroidery thread, it looks just like the jeans thread with zero complications. And you buy it one hue lighter than that gold on your jeans because it won't fade. It's polyester, it won't fade, and the jeans will fade a little bit over time, so it stays in hue. I bought 6 pairs of these. They were like $125 jeans from Express, like designer jeans. They were 32, 34. Men who are 34 inseam are like 38, 42 waist. They're big guys. And so I had to hem 6 pairs, put the podcast on, cut them all off, put the embroidery thread on, and just go to town. So for the price of 1 pair of jeans, I got 6. That paid for a basic sewing machine, right then and there. So that's how you justify, right? I interviewed with Bernina with a shirt that cost me $4 to make buttons included. Now the Bernina had cost $1,300, but you don't count that. Now I was married for 10 years, and at one point I did a bay window curtain. It was a jacquard print, but also jacquard weave into the print. It was a botanical. We were both plant scientists, so I made a wall-to-wall curtain. The $1,000 curtain cost me $100 to make. That paid for the Bernina, right? So, so that always make a sample on a new fabric and do it on the grain and cross grain and bias. Your straight stitch may work great on the grain, and then suddenly you hem something, and whoop, why is this warping? Because it's on the cross grain. Always work all dimensions. And then if you see, okay, then you adapt from there. Okay, so that's for testing. So I'm going to do next. I'm going to make a dart. How many of you have sewn darts in your life? Yes.
So you said when it puckers to lengthen the stitch?
No, you would probably shorten your stitch to a certain point and loosen your tension if it's still too much. Actually, I forgot to mention anyway. How many of you have sewn a dart in your life? Okay, for fit, right? Probably for garments. But you also use them for like poofs, like upholstery, stuff like that. Because the cheat mode, like when you make one of those poofs or footrests, they do like tapered strips of fabric. Yeah, you're doing all the bias seams, and then at the end it kind of flops a little bit on the top, correct? So if you do straight seams instead, nothing will pucker, it's all on the grain, and then you dart them instead. You just do regular darts and then bring everything in, and then you won't have to like over pad the top and fudge with it and speak French to it when you get there. So darts, my mother passed away last year, 91 years old. She had 6 kids in 7 years, 5'2", 98 pounds. Tough chick, very Catholic too. So, and we have a saying in French, when you're being a perfectionist and it's time to let it go, we say you don't have to be more Catholic than the Pope. So anyway, my mother, we talked about, my $4 shirt. She said, you didn't start easy. You started with shirts. She thought those tops were hard. She made me cross-country skiing pants in corduroy with welt pockets. Okay, yeah. For me, pants are harder. There's cross seam, there's a zipper in there, there's the tabs and all that. So she said, no, well, I said, shirts are easy. Men are easy anyway. You fit at the shoulder. Women, you have to fit at the bust line. She's 71 years old when I gave her the Bernina, and she goes, yeah, that damn thing didn't stay put. Every 10 years, it dropped an inch. That's my mother for you. So I'm turning into my mother. So now, ladies or husbands, if you're married, the same, if you sew, when you finger press, I'm going to make a dart, I'm going to finger press it. Normally I would press it at the iron, and I'll use the iron later this afternoon. You would finger press it. I'm not married to any y'all, so I can reprogram your brains. Oh, and also I'm allowed to be right. So finger pressing, I want you to reprogram those words to fingernail creasing. Okay? Now, I have hand lotion on. My fingers were dry this morning. Okay? So I put hand lotion on. And what's hand lotion? It's fabric softener. So if you're going to do your finger like this, you're putting fabric softener on what you're trying to crease. What does fabric softener do? It prevents wrinkling, which is creasing. Right? So what you want to do is, let me stand up. You want to do it, oh boy, it's getting personal. All right, you do with the side or the top of your fingernail, just a nail. And you scrape towards yourself, never away because it will shear off. Towards yourself, half an inch at a time. And you just crease it. And I have my students in class do halfway the old way with their finger, halfway with the nail, and the difference is, okay, well, there you go. You can tell up front, this is more creased than that. Right? So and I see people then go like this. I said, no, what part of you, if you do this, what part of your finger is smoothing the fabric before the nail reaches it, right? So it's really, so you will find out whether you pay too much or not enough for that nail polish. They should make a epoxy reinforced nail polish just for the sewer's nails. All right, so I'm going to draw a line for a dart. And it's funny when you ask people like draw a 3-inch line, you end up with this. I said, no, those are fisherman hinges, right? Like you want this much. So I'm going to draw a line parallel here. My pen will wake up. There you go. And I'm going to do a line that tapers off. You have some straight darts and tapered darts. Better shaping darts are tapered. And I'm going to do this, okay? So this foot, it would work. I can sew the dart with this. It feeds very well. But the problem with a foot like this, can we do this? This foot has a groove, and I would follow the line. But if I follow the line, by the time I stitch it down, I'm almost a ½ inch past where I'm looking versus where I'm stitching. So if I happen to veer off just a hair, by the time I notice it here, it's too late. So there's a solution for this. It's a clear foot. So 34C, and there's also a 34D if you have a Bernina with dual feed. If you have a dual feed Bernina, I would say get the D version of the foot first. So this allows me to see right through the little red marker. I can see and never deviate. Okay, it's basic. You notice that they pay the lines in the center, the dash lines, which in New Jersey are just decorations. They don't serve a purpose. But they paint them in white now, but they often have a black flank on both sides, so that the cars with the cameras can actually spot the lines better, right? So they can stay on track. So this will help you stay on track. I'm gonna put the foot on. And then I'm gonna do by the way, those of you who have a Bernina, how many of you have a Bernina? Anybody actually, any machine, everybody the same. If you have a foot that's decorative like this, does not have a slit to pass the thread. So, if you put the foot on, you still have the thread flopping on top. What you do instead is you approach it at 90 degrees like this, pull up the needle through the foot opening, and then pluck your thread. And I learned that 5 years ago from a colleague, and to my last day, I will revere her knowledge. So this is ready to go. If you watch my videos, you'll see my finger always going down here and tapping and holding my thread when I start. That's just an old habit. If you do a dart, you would do this. So I'm using the freehand system. I'm going to start here. I'm going to use a shortish stitch, like stitch length 2.0. That's about the regular length for this cotton anyway. This would be like a shirt weight, what they call shirting fabric, right? Blouse weight silk would work as well. So I would do this. Whoa, I'm still on a honeycomb stitch. It would be nice to stitch my stitch. Usually I don't yap at the wall while I'm sewing, so but I might do some funny stuff today. That's why I said monkey on a chair. All right. Oh, look, it's a straight stitch. Now, my needle is not stopping down. 99% of the time I sew needle. How many of you sew with needle stop down? Right? And then on the Bernina, you have the heel kick, right? You can just tap the heel and then it lifts the needle. So I'm going to follow this. It's super easy. When I get to here, I will actually pivot rather than try to turn the fabric. If you turn the fabric, you're doing this to your dart. If you don't do a dart right, ladies, you will have a second pair when you're done. And they will never press out. Okay? So, I don't know, maybe that's why my mother thought that these darts were hard. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to pivot. See this? Appliqué people know about pivot. So 2 or 3 stitches. But I know my red line is letting me know ahead of time if I'm about to leave my stitch length, okay? When I'm about ready to go, this is gonna go right to the end. I'm gonna stop one stitch, and I can one stitch at a time. I'm gonna turn the setting off. I have hover turned on, which is very useful for regular seaming, but for stop and go, you can turn it off. So I'm gonna go, whoops, not here, it's a sewing setting. And I'm just gonna turn the hover, which is press the foot hover position, and I'm gonna go here, and we are done, back to sewing. There you go. All right, so I'm gonna do one stitch at a time, and then when the last stitch, do you see this? Because I could sew one stitch at a time, and the foot control is very firm, so, and my foot, Bernina people, the anatomy of your foot control, you know that circle for the heel kick? Make sure the natural ball of your heel, not your shoe, your heel is on there. Because the Skechers now, they go like 3 inches behind your heel, right? I can't walk in those, I feel like I need a cane or something. So the ball of your heel needs to be there. Then you can just rock your foot and just get one stitch, right? So whatever your machine is, if your foot, my aunt, made the mistake of having 3 bolts put into her ankle, right? It didn't deal with the pain, it just locked her foot up. So there's a button usually on all your machines, modern computerized machines, with the needle up and down, so you can just do one more stitch, using that, and you stop here. So at this point, I'm going to go here, and do you see that little red line is right on the fold? And I didn't do anything special here, and I have not sewn this in months. Right, I haven't demoed this in months. The machine does the trick for you. I'm going to shrink my stitch length to about 1.5, very tiny. Okay, and I'm going to take about 1, 2, 3, and a 4 and a 5 stitches, and I'm done. People who do darts would tell you, you raise your needle, you pinch, you pull out nice long tails, you would tie your dart. Okay, so when you're done, you would open, let's see here. Does that show it all? Do you see the little trailing stitches right here? Okay, so I won't bother tying the dart today, but when that's done, I would trim this about, I want to say a 1/16 of an inch and press it open. There's a little tool, I don't know, do you carry the OESD embroidery tools? Yeah. Okay, the expert point and turn tool. It's a metal rod with 2 beads. Oh, that's the bomb. Because you don't burn your fingers, big plus right there. And then you use the bead to open up that seam allowance as the tip of the iron just goes and follows it, and you can open anything, right? So when you turn this, and you go and press your dart, I didn't leave enough length at the bottom. This is a skimpy dart. Do you see there's no pucker at the end? It will lie flat, right? The people in the front, can we do this? Okay, it will lie smoother. Those trailing stitches, what they did is, you have, especially if it's a triangular dart, you have a converging zone with stresses coming to a point. And now you have thickness down there, 4 layers of fabric basically, and you release this all at once. Well, it's going to create a little crater, right? So by trailing those stitches, you diffuse the stress. So now with a bit of 505, 2 of those, you can go to the beach. So this is how you do a dart. Now you may never do a dart for a garment, but you can do it for dull clothes. You can do it for upholstery stuff. Anything that's cylindrical that will taper, you can use a dart as a shaping device. But the dart here is just a pretext. It was that with this foot, with a clear foot with markings, and this foot happens to have crosshairs. Typically, clear feet like this will have. Let me do this. Will have crosshairs, right? Do you see that? So if I need to do like a 4-inch long decorative stitch, little flowers, whatever, little scallop, over a pocket topper, something like that, I can mark a line. If you need to have a start and stop point, don't put dots. They're hard to track. Put a line and 2 crosshairs, right? That way your T marks will be at the start and your T mark will hit the stop. And then you never overshoot your line. You'll be right then and there. Okay, so that's for a clear foot. There's two versions of it basically. There's 2 feet actually. One is 34. 34 has a flat sole like the regular sewing foot. So it smacks down on the fabric. You do decorative stitches, open stitching like little flowers, honeycomb, that kind of thing, right? 39 has a satin stitch channel underneath. So if you do denser stitching, it will let it, or if you couch a ribbon and all that, it will let it glide under without scraping and stalling, right? It will feed better. So this one, and if you have a Bernina 34 comes in narrow, if you have a 4 series, for instance, a 475, it comes in narrow for that. It comes in wide, like in C version, and there's a dual feed version as well available if you have dual feed. If you have a dual feed machine, I would say get the dual feed version. You get that extra traction, which is very good. The 39C will not come as a D foot. there's not enough material left because of the channel, the tunnel here. It would make the foot vulnerable to breaking, and the Swiss won't do that. Okay, so that's for visibility. It makes a big difference. Now, so those of you who've done darts, have you done them for more than garments? Yeah. Yeah, because we don't do garments as much anymore, right? It's harder to find the fabric. It's depending where you live. Do you have access to good fabric?
None of us are naked.
Did you make what you wear?
No.
Oh, there you go. No, but we don't really make garments much anymore. For most people. Well, you should see what she's wearing. I told her this morning, I just love your outfit. No, you have to have access to the fabrics. Yes. Like in the burbs of Chicago, when I need. Well, I'll cook dinner. So when I need, they have some good fabrics there. Not to badmouth anybody, but I call it that girl's place, Joanne. When I need to like cheap fabric, they do sell the cheap crap. They have some good fabrics too, but they have some of the low grade stuff. So when I need to show what a crappy fabric will do, I at the office I'll say I'm going to that girl's place. Anybody needs some cheap stuff? So when I come back, that says I feel like I need a shower. Although we have. So and I've had some very good stuff there, and then there's one vinyl. There's cheap stuff with the flannelly backing that you would use for a picnic table that may have slivers, and you want to have a party. And Jack did not resand and paint the table like he said he would. Does it really pick on you here?
No.
There you go. He will tell them don't bring it back. All right. So you maybe and you're fancy. You don't want to just staple it underneath because that's ratchet. Okay, that's not good. So you will hem it because you're a high-end sewing machine person, right? And then when you sew together, if you have to put pieces together, you would do right sides, the clingy sides together, no issue. Right? This would just go through like flannel or velvet, right? But when you hem, you would do this. And now you have clingy against the machine and clingy against the foot. And you sew this out, and then your tablecloth is all warping along the way, and you go like, it's the machine, right? Call the store. So let me show you here. I'm going to just do a regular foot. I'm going to go back to, I have to remember where I put them. All right, I'm just going to put a regular foot on. And I'm going to cheat for this one. I will not engage dual feet. That's like using one seat. So that, just as a quick demo. So I'm going to just two layers of this. When you test something, it's funny, I teach a 4-day boot camp. And it takes some people 4 days to stop trying to do a 5/8 or a 1/4 inch seam. When you want to test, I'm testing in the 2 strips together like this. I'm putting the clingy sides out. And I'm going to stitch down the middle. This could be scraps, right? This stuff can be directional. You wouldn't think it's vinyl, but because the vinyl is stretchy. It's the bottom layer that may or may not be directional. And I've had some. This one is not very much. This won't do much. There's one that I'll show you. I'll talk about it later. So I'm going to sew this. This is my straight stitch. I'm just going to actually clear it, and I'm just going to sew my straight stitch. And this is, look, Mom, no hands. Let the machine sew it. Oh my God. And then when you get there, you go like, oh, you call the store, you go like, what is wrong with my machine? Right? That's because the fabric was clinging to the foot. The feed dog was hauling the bottom one. This is as bad as I've ever seen it. Okay? This is good. This is good bad. This is good bad. So the next thing you want to do is you would say, well, you've heard you use a non-stick foot, right? So I'm going to put a non-stick foot on. But I'm not going to put the dual feet in on yet. Okay. All right. So and again, this foot I'll leave the stitch on top. Let me just check one setting just in case here. No, not here. It'll be. Yeah, we're good. All right.
I thought you weren't going to use the dual feet.
Thank you. You sound like my mother. It's a good reference. It's actually a mark of honor. My mother, 6 kids in 7 years, right? And tiny little woman, going out the door in the morning. You have your dictionary. You have your lunch. You have your raincoat. It was air traffic control. She knew everything. So when you do this, this will help with some of the, notice it's cupping, but not as bad. And this stuff is very clingy. You know, it's very, very clingy. So this is cupping, but not quite as bad. So this, I call that making lasagna if you look at the bottom layer. See that? Not recommended fabric for ruffles. Yes.
Did you make the stitch smaller?
No, 2.5. But this was clinging. So it was not wanting to feed. And that's why I look at the differential. Normally you get about 1/8 of an inch. Like that smoother, cheapy stuff, the cheapy stuff would feed better than this. This one is, yeah, you thought it's actually decent quality. It just doesn't behave, right? So in the factory that sews this stuff, they would calibrate the machine in the morning. So we went from a bracelet to a boat, okay? Now we're gonna aim for a surfboard, okay? So I'm gonna engage dual feed. That should help some. Because it will, and by the way, any of you have a 990? Okay, the dual feed can be made to go faster than the feed dog. So in a case like this, I would say, oh yeah, you're doing that, right? That would, right off the bat. So I'm gonna do this again in the middle. I'm doing the middle. I did 7 years of grad school at Cornell. I learned 3 things. I'm a fully trained monkey now. One is eliminate variables. Makes your thesis easier, right? So eliminate variables. Here, it's not just a strip. I don't have a big flop of a panel on one side, uneven from the 5/8 of an inch the other side, right? I eliminate variables. Just a little strip, go in the middle, let it go, right? So, and if you need to guide fabric, I don't have long nails, so it's easy. I just put my fingers as a guard on both sides, and I let that guide the fabric. So it's still cupping a bit, but my 2 ends finish pretty much at the same. If you need to test something like this, the strips don't need to be the same length. Just butt the finish line together, right? And if anything happens between the layers, like this, then you'll see that your top layer is now overshooting the bottom layer, right? So the beginning doesn't matter. So this is now a snowboard. It's a little better than the one before, right? Yes?
Is there any reason not to use the Teflon for everything?
Well, eventually it'll wear off because it's like a Teflon pan. Friction will wear it off. You can. It's not necessary for everything. No, I really keep it for sticky stuff like this. Metal glides well on cotton, but this is, and it's funny because it feels humid today, and it's actually I can feel it on the fabric. Now we're gonna do for the secret sauce. You know the pinch of salt is reserved for the end, right? So we're gonna do this. I'm gonna match my ends. I'm going to go to my press-a-foot pressure, and I'm going to crank it down. I usually say start with half, right? You can go 1/3 if you want. So I'm going to go there, and then at this point, if I were guiding this, it's barely lifting here. If I were guiding this the normal way, controlling my edge, it would not do it. Whoop, I looked away. All right, so this is almost flat, and if I were guiding my fabric, it's not fighting me back. It's not springing like this one is springing a little more. See that? So just guiding would take care of it. So basically, I'm having the machine compensate for the fabric's failure to feed properly. So the foot is Teflon. We're not allowed to say Teflon because DuPont, yeah, you guys know DuPont around here, right? They're like money. You buy the stuff, you put it on your product, but you cannot cut it down until you buy the right to use the name of the product. So we don't, Schmetz has a non-stick needle now, right? Schmetz has a super non-stick. It's a universal coated with PTFE, Teflon, but like us, they call it non-stick. It's very good for squeegee materials like, the scuba diving material. A neoprene, yeah. So anything rubbery like this, it's very good needle for that. So I use this a lot. And if you have a dual feed machine, do get the D version of the non-stick foot, okay? But there's one available for all types of feed dog, like narrow, wide, and wide with dual feed, okay? And all companies have a lot of companies will have a Teflon tape glued underneath a metal foot or plastic foot typically. It glues better to plastic, so at that point it makes sense. We have one like this. The narrow one is a plastic foot. The sole is plastic with the tape glued on, because for a small foot like this, spraying is much harder to get all the nooks. It's easier, it's more effective with the tape. So that's how they do. And it was yes.
On the 990, you said that the dual feed goes faster than.
The dual feed is adjustable.
So you can adjust.
Yeah, the standard is 1-to-1. 1.0. You can go faster or slower. Yeah. So you can use this to your advantage in a lot of situations, even piecing quilts. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's for the sticky stuff. Now, my favorite. This is my favorite technique to teach in my students, and I when I teach in boot camp, we do it. I ask, most of the students are ladies. And I say, okay, how many of you have never done corded piping? Okay. Wow, you guys are good. Most of you have done corded piping, right? Zipper foot, right? All right, that's the way your mama learned it from her mama, and that's the way she learned it to you, right? All right, so I'm going to do it with the zipper foot first. And it's funny because in the boot camp, I tell the ladies, you're going to make perfect corded piping the first time. And it works. The feet make it work, period. And then when we're done, I says, when's the last time a man promised you something and delivered exactly what he promised? With a good chuckle on that one. This is our zipper foot. I will select on the machine because, and I'm going to clear this. I'm going to clear this one. We're done with the press foot pressure. I'm going to go to the presser foot, and I'm going to select 4D because this foot has metal in the middle. On the Bernina, you don't slide the zipper foot because the slider makes the foot a little wobbly, just a hair. Ours is like completely sturdy and stable. We move the needle over instead. So that way you have a more stable reference. So because if you do something like this on like heavy upholstery fabric, it gets, or a big tote bag, sometimes the project will wiggle the foot. In this case, it doesn't. So I'm going to do this. If I had my stitch in the middle on my screen, do you see the stitch turns red? If it red, well, okay. Well, according to what I saw on the highway yesterday, apparently red is like just a decoration color sometimes. It supposedly means no-go, right? Okay, so in this point, it says no-go. So I'm going to move my needle all the way over until it's all the way to the, and all stitches on a Bernina can be moved over, not just a straight stitch, which means you never have to fudge your eye line. You can actually let the machine move the stitch to where you guide it one way, and then you can move the stitch as you need it. So I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to sew the old-fashioned way. And what I do when I do this is I do the caterpillar with my fingers, right, to walk it through. So I'm going to walk this. And then I'm gonna slow down a little bit here. I speak fast, I drive fast, I eat fast, but I sew slow. Okay, so when I'm gonna go, I'd rather have a moderate speed and floor it than my focus is singly on my hands. I'm not gauging the speed, right? So here we go, and then cut. Nice little touch on the 990, they put the cutter button is rather final. So they put a raised rib on it. So if your finger feels the little nubby, like the J and the F keys on your keyboard. So if you feel the nubby, like, Okay, so when I'm done, picture like like a bay window, and you have a big, big Venetian blinds and all that. And you have a trim at the top, right? So every time when I do this, it's not bad. But I can tell it's a bit tighter here and just a bit looser there. Okay, it goes close. It's good enough for government work. I mean, from looks great, doesn't it? Right? But I can tell it's good. It's fine. It's the way it would be if you use a zipper foot. So we're done with the zipper foot. For this kind of fabric, regular fabric, I will never use that again. So now I'm going to. Now, if you had heavier fabric, like a heavy corduroy, or you want to do a trim like this with, let's say, heavy canvas, yes, you could still use a zipper foot, right? For brute force, it will still work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use foot number 12C. 12C, and we call it, in Bernina land, I call it presser foot bingo. You call the numbers and people pick it up. This has a big channel underneath. And I'm going to select it on the screen. Actually, if we can show it on the screen, you'll see what it looks like from the top. So from the top, do you see there's a groove in the metal here? This hole is if you wanted to put a rat tail or something and couch it. This foot will glide very well, and you can actually use it for couching, like not free motion, but freestyle. Okay? So this will make use of as we proceed. So I'm going to move my straight stitch all the way to the far right. Okay? I'm going to put the foot on. There's no D version of that foot, by the way, so don't ask. Oh, look, this is a foot without a slit, so I'm going to thread it. And this is not my regular height, so I'm like, where's everything? Oh, there it is. And with the bifocals, you know, how many, trick question, how many of us wear bifocals, right? Focal, bifocal, not there. Right? And you know, you look at your house, it doesn't look dirty to me. It's all below the bifocals. All right, so I'm going to do this. And then when the cord is wrapped, all I have to do is put it right under the groove in the foot here. The cord will guide itself into the groove. And then it will stitch on the side. So I'm going to do this. And I just need to, let me do that again. This is, I'm sitting high right now. And okay, a good chair. How many of you have a good chair already? Okay, the rest of you, you put your butt on the chair, and when the butt and the brain agree, instantly buy the damn chair. Okay, a chair is, I have a chair at home, it's like the Bernina, the red one. It's a different brand, they don't exist anymore. They were stump chairs, but similar concept, and it's just the right height and no arms. It's like really comfy for me. And my sewing improved because I don't get tired sitting on that chair, right? So, all right, I'm gonna run this, and I'm gonna, whoop, free control. All right. And I'm good on my stitch length. So I'm going to go there and just keep going. You don't want to stitch too short on this. So this is going to be two things here. One, it will be more even, but it will, because I moved my needle all the way out, it will be a little loose. You could still rearrange the cord in there. Okay. This is what we call 1/4 inch net wrapped cord. If you want to do something like this on a tote bag to give it more body at the top so it stays open more, use clothesline. Okay, and vinyl covered clothesline is even better for that. It has more body. Right? So that's that. Then you want to attach this to your, I would have 2 pieces of fabric, like my pillow, if you want, for my pillow sham. I would just line this up at the edge, right, and run the same seam again. Right? So monkey no longer has to program brain. Brain already programmed on first pass. So I'm going to go like this, same stitch length. And you know, if you're doing yards for a curtain, that just sounds good. All right. Then I'm going to cut. And when it's done, now, and I'll talk about tips on making. So now I'm making the sandwich, right? Because when you're done, this would be your finish inserted, you know, sorry. I was like, you see this? See, when I'm done, this will be in between the 2 layers, right? So I'm just going to finish my sandwich. And now I can't see the cord, but I can feel it. So I am going to put this under, feel the cord, put that under the foot. And you don't start in the corner. You know, you start on the round straight away and you finish there. So I'm going to go like this and finish up. Oops, I made a mistake here. I need to bring my needle 1 notch in. And that's the secret sauce. You tuck the needle in 1 stop. That will snug it up to the cord. So here we go. And when you're done, you open that up. And it's nothing special I did. I just followed the method, right? Oh, there you go. Here. You mean you want to see? See that? It's right there. So there are, for those of you, I don't know how many feet of this type Baby Lock has. So they potentially are different sizes you'll want to investigate. In Bernina land, let me take this off. Let me show you here. There's 3 feet that you can use. Okay? Yes.
Can you use any size cording with that foot?
Aha. She's not a plant, but she asked the right question. And this is what I'm about to explain. So you're right on. All right. So those of you who have a Bernina, there's a 12C. C means it's 9 millimeter wide capable. It will do a 1/4 inch cord. So 12C. Oh, you mean you want to see? Sorry. I'm not used to having the bird over my shoulder. All right. So this is a 1/4 inch cord. There's a smaller version, number 12, 1/8 of an inch cord. Normally, they tell you to pick the foot on a Bernina based on the width of your feed dog, right? A C foot for a wide machine and all that. No, not this case. This case, it's cord size, period. So 12 without a C is smaller than this, 1/8 of an inch cord. 12C is bigger, has a bigger channel, 1/4 inch cord. And if you want to do micro piping, there's number 23 here. Number 23, do you see how tiny that channel is in the middle there? So you can put a pearl cotton on a handkerchief linen and do a corded piping with that. You could use a colored cord have it kind of show through. No, the color show through. So if you want to do like a christening gown and you want to do a little, we don't do blue and pink. my sisters play soccer. There was never anything pink in the house. I didn't grow up with pink. I wear pink. My sisters don't. Okay, so you could actually use a tinted. You can use this for smaller ones. So you want to do a ring bearer's pillow and you want to do like a tiny cording, piping with a satin around the edge. This foot will be great for that. Okay, so tiny. What I call micro, 12, number 12 for 1/8 of an inch, and number 12C for 1/4 inch cord. Okay, anything bigger than that, we have a roller foot, a wheel foot. That the big decorated cord, that has a tape. You could use that because that wheel is slanted. It will come right up to the rope. And then you move the needle right at that spot, and it will stitch it right then and there. Okay, so you can do upholstery on a 3 Series baby Bernina. We have them at the office. When I had to do the heavy video, the 12 layers of what I call Jethro overall denim. Like not the little spandex, like shirtwaist denim, but the crunchy stuff. I did 12 layers. It could barely get under the foot, and the little baby one did it. So, but the foot will work the same way. Although, so if you have a toter machine like Baby Lock, Bernina doesn't matter. If the foot fits on both machines, you can use a smaller machine when you go somewhere and use it with the same foot. So that's always a plus. So this is for corded piping. This foot, Bernina's been making feet for a long time. This is called a bulky overlock foot, and people go like, "What's that?" Do you remember the knitting machines in the 90s, the Passat machines? My mother would buy knit. We were poor. We were working class poor. My mother could turn sawdust into a feast. Good thing my father was a carpenter. So anyway, she would buy yards, and she made me, it's like a turtleneck if you want. The 2 layers went up here and down, and then double turned. So it's 4 layers. In Canada at 40 below, you could go deliver the newspaper, and you never know it's 40 below. Right? So that foot was so you could cut the knit, and when you cut the knit in the groove underneath here, this toe is taller. This toe is taller, and this is the outside, so it would not squish down and stretch that knit out of shape and ravel it out. The knit would bloom into the channel and get sewn undisturbed, and you could sew knits together, like hand knit as well. So this is called a bulky overlock foot. Nobody uses it for that anymore. Nobody even knows it's called that anymore, or why it's called that. So this is where the history of the names, the Swiss. Oh, question. I thought you were scratching your head. She parked her head there. Yes.
I make covered cording all the time for projects like pillows and
Yeah.
things. And I always cut it on the bottom.
Yeah, oh, yes.
45 degree, but look, if my eyes don't deceive me, like.
No, this was just to show the base of the technique, but you make a good point. So I have a little list here. So tips for corded piping. There you go. Tips for corded piping. So don't use too short a stitch, because you're doing 3 seam passes in very close quarters. And remember what I said about the sewing thread always being pretty much thicker on this kind of stuff than the warp and weft threads. So if you're injecting rope, inserting rope in holes, if your stitch is too short, you will end up ripping the project. You might cut your project. So my stitch length was 2.5. If it's a more delicate fabric like a satin, I would use a microtex needle. I may use a finer thread, and I would use a shorter stitch. But I would test first. Next, use bias strips. You all know how to make bias, right? You make a tube, you offset it. You do not need to offset 45 degrees. That is nasty. That is hard to work with. When you close the tube, offset maybe 15, 20 degrees. That's enough to give you a bias. And then it will conform to curves and to shapes better. Okay, so if you cut on the grain, it will not go around curves very well. It will pucker. Okay, so that's standard for corded piping, but just as a review. And then if you can, round your corners. Right, there's a way to pleat and pinch a corner, and so you round the piping, but not the corner. No, I've had the same plates for 20 some years. So my dinner plates give me this corner, my bread plates give me that corner, and I put the 4 corners stacked up together, rotary cut, 1 shot around, and all the same. Right, so rounded corners work, and also when you have to wash the pillow, because I have a cat, you have a dog, you have children. Right? They don't stay pretty, and a square corner will flop over time. right? So the rounded corner will stay better. If anything, those square forms, the pillow fillers, they will push into that round corner and could keep it looking nice. My son and I would do pillow fights. We'd never hit each other. That's not allowed. But we do pillow fights on the couch. 6 pillows, 3-3. The one who ends up with 6 loses. I won every time. I had to pull rank. All right, so you would clip your seam allowances, and you have 2 layers on the piping there. So before you go into a corner, I would clip the seam allowances. And I made a tote bag once. It cost me $2.50, same remnants store I bought the fabric for the shirt. And the bag is so ugly, the canvas was so ugly that you could put your baby, your phone, your tablet, your wallet in there on the beach, nobody will touch it. But I did corded piping, with canvas, to reinforce the top, and then I did with clothesline, and I did the U's at the front and the back to give it shape. Those big Land's End tote bags, they're hard to close. Well, that's because that canvas is like the heaviest drill cloth you can buy. But with canvas, regular canvas, it will flop. So I did that to reinforce it. And the clothesline, the vinyl covered clothesline, if the bag starts fraying the fabric a little bit, that clothesline doesn't fall apart. So it will still have you. It did 19 years of laundromat. And I still have it today. It's still ugly, but I still have it today. So that one, I could not pin together. It was too heavy. So I used those, scissor action staplers. Those are called bachelor's pins. And I stapled it together. Any retired nurses? You were like this. When I was done, you take the needle nose pliers and you go like, this won't hurt a bit. So I just pulled. Now, if you want to use staples, they work. They totally work. They will hold a project like that together. When you're done, you pull them up with needle nose pliers. Then, if you staple, though, make sure the little dog ears, the bent ends, are on the top, not on the bed of the machine. They will scrape, right? So just a little thing. Otherwise, you may leave marks on your machine. Okay. So that's for that. And then, for extra body, you can use clothesline and vinyl covered clothesline. It's cheap, and you get yards and yards and yards of it. Okay. Now, if you want something flexy and supple and soft for the living room pillow, no, those are stiff, right? So you want this kind of cord, the cotton cord. Super cheap. The stores have it on the reel. It's like 150 yards a reel, so you could buy a whole reel if you wanted to. Okay, so good questions. And, next thing is, I teach this class at different venues. Normally, we teach it hands-on. So this first time I'm doing it as a demo, which is just as much fun. But if I say X and I sew Y, you'll know why, because I'm spieling while I'm sewing. All right, so we are going to join edges together. It seems like an easy thing, right? Well, we're going to edge stitch. So anybody knows the Cheapskate Gazette? No, I think it's gone offside. It's for cheapskates. People tell you just add 1 tablespoon of coffee grounds to yesterday's, and you did that already yesterday to make the coffee today, and after a week, after a week it's called compost, honey. So people tell you don't need an edge stitch foot if you have the blind stitch foot, right? Except the blind stitch foot, the guide in the middle has a kink. Oh, sorry. Thank you for the reminder. I told you I'm not used to doing it this way. So do you see the little guide in the middle there? Let me station here. Do you see the kink here? So the kink means that it will basically allow the needle to stitch without hitting the fold. And then the guide goes beyond the stitch point to the back, right? So that on a Bernina, I don't know if they're all like this nowadays, but on a Bernina, because you have this guide in the middle, when it takes the zigzag to bite into the fold, and polar fleece, right? The fluff is reached before the actual matrix that forms the fabric, right? So you may have to widen a little bit. Most blind hem's feet have a screw, and they wiggle. They're not exactly good. The Swiss, we have an expression in Swiss German, Gudentight. So the foot is stationary. You just increase the stitch width to go get the bite a little further. But the machine has calibrated the stitch exactly to the steel where it knows it is, right? So the precision is there to start, and then for fine-tuning if you need to, okay? So, yes?
What is the screw for?
This one doesn't have a screw.
What?
On the screw is to adjust the left to right, because if you have a certain fabric, like the polar fleece, remember, the fluff will reach the guide, but you cannot stitch into the fluff. You need to go get the base of the fabric, the matrix itself. So you would have to move that guide out a little bit. Here you would just widen the stitch until the bite is just right. Okay, so it's more stable is what I'm saying. So this, you could edge stitch on this side. On the other side, the kink is there, and if you want to edge stitch close, the machine will give you a red line. You would break the needle. Not good. So it's a one-sided edge stitcher. Okay, the foot number 10 or 10C or 10D, there's 3 versions, the usual. I'm going to use the D version here, and this one has a slit. So I'm going to put the D version, and this one I can put my thread under. So remember remember finger pressing, right? So I'm going to fingernail crease this. There you go. And then I'm going to edge stitch from one side. I'm going to move my needle. So I'm going to basically move my needle over. I'm going to select my foot. I like to select my foot if you have a Bernina. I like to select the foot. I'm not very disciplined. I've driven stick all my life. I don't like automatic most things, but this is a safety feature, right? If a foot presents an obstacle, it will actually observe the limitation. So I'm going to move this to 2 needle positions over. Ensure proper presser foot is selected. Oh, guess what? I selected 10C and I put 10D on. And the machine's like, you don't. There you go. All right, so I'm going to stitch this down. This is 2 needle positions over from the center. I'm going to go 1 needle position over from center and do this. And with an edge stitch foot, notice I did not pay it. I wasn't careful. I went faster than I should for edge stitching. And then, you see from the front, as you are my witness. You see how close that is? All right. No, but they can vouch for real. Do you see how close that is? Right? And I wasn't careful. Now, I slow down the machine. That's my insurance policy, right? And it works every time. Now, if you have a Bernina with dual feed, how many of you have a Bernina with dual feed? Okay. If you have dual feed, get the D version of the foot. Because it has one advantage. I did not know that advantage I didn't realize it until I had to join. It wasn't lace, but it was a very lace-like fabric, to a regular piece of fabric. And by having the pull from the back of the foot is here, but having the pull at the back, it helps maintain longitudinal tracking. It's like it's tugging in and keeping it lined up. Now, do you remember high school geometry and physics? I know you don't want to. That was not the question. Do you remember it? Right? She made a face like, ugh. So, remember the word fulcrum? They should have just said it's a damn teeter-totter. Right? So, really, they taught it all wrong. I want to teach science to teenagers in the kitchen. Yes, there's a lot of science in the kitchen, right? And temperature burns, right? So, when you do this, notice this puckered a little bit. Okay, this thread is a little thick for this, right? And because it's an edge stitching, I would have probably loosened my tension a little bit, just because this is not a structural, it's a finishing touch. So there's a different purpose there. But anyway, that's for that. And I would probably have shortened my stitch a little bit for this, just to get a tight. But you can do edge stitching close to the edge with really thick thread as well on certain fabrics, right? So what I do here is I basically go slow, follow, and the dual feed is helping keep it lined up. If you steer too much, the needle and the foot becomes a fulcrum. And then you might catch it, but when you do this, you see the buckle here? And you may nail that down. And then when you're done, you go, there's a ripple. What's wrong with my machine? We're back to square one, right? So little tip, anytime you do edge stitching like this, remember, you have fabric on one side only, nothing on the other side. So you're literally driving on the edge. You've heard of Peru, right? When you go to Cusco, Machu Picchu, you're right. Don't look down, don't look down, because there's no shoulder, right? So you have no shoulder here. So what happens is that if you do anything at the front, it happens really fast. So what I do is I let it go, and I put my one. This is the foot here at the machine. And this is the stitch plate. So if the foot is here, the fabric is here. I put my finger on the fabric, press down a little bit, and then let the machine take the fabric from me. If you learn one thing today, let your sewing machine take the fabric from you. My mother had a Singer from the 70s, top of the line. Touchtronic 2010, the successor to the Athena 2000, right? Big machine, fancy. My mother read the book. She used everything. She used that machine. But they had rubber feed dogs, and they were out unevenly. Mom sewed like this. And when I gave her a Bernina at age 71, I said, what are you doing? So I put the 2 pieces of fabric. I said, give me the machine. I put that there. I step on the gas and it goes right through. Modern machines feed better than that. And she looked at me. But then when she saw me sewing without pins, she went like this. Because she learned to sew from the nuns. You pin, and then you pin some more. So anyway, that's for edge stitching. And then if you wanted to use a foot like this, it can also join edges. It can also join edges. So this one, actually, well, I did one side. Let me do the other side. I'm going to do a second one here. I'm going to fingernail crease again. There you go. And I'm going to move my needle to the other side. And I can do, I'm going to do like a 1, 2, 3 actually. So I'm going to start at 1. On the edge. And then I'm going to go 2. Notice I'm pressing down here. I'm not white knuckling. I'm going to go 3. And that's as far as I would go. 3 would be what you would use probably on a canvas. And then now the monkey is trained. I'm going to go to the camera first. Okay. This on the edge here. When we do this in boot camp, some people did not know they could stitch this close to an edge. With the, how many people used to, the old machines, way, way old, like 50s, 60s, 70s, the presser foot had those 2 indented toes like this. In French, it's called a doze foot. Not a presser foot, but a doze foot, right? Because it looks like a doze foot. And how many people, you've tried to follow an edge with this? No. You're going to be on and off the edge. That's when you drive and you hear the vibrator strip on the side. Yeah, no, wrong presser foot. Okay. So this was 1. This is position 2, okay, right? And then this was 3. So that would work great on position 3 with upholstery thread on a canvas. Looks like 1 with regular thread on a muslin. That makes sense? So you can move it out, and that was 4 and 5. There's more, right? So there were more available. So that was for that. Now, I'm going to join 2 pieces of fabric together. And I'm going to finger crease them. By the way, when we teach a sewing class, if your fabric is like this, if it's a rectangle, if you put the long sides together, we call that folding hot dog style. And then the other one is hamburger style. Okay, then you don't need to explain for the rest of the class. And one lady once said, I don't eat hot dogs. I'm a heretic. I'm a heretic. I put ketchup and sriracha on my hot dog. I know. My mother, remember? I know. Well, I lived in New York State for 10 years, so sorry. Yeah. And I like relish on my hot dog too. I like to vary them. I know. I'm a total heretic. But I don't live in Chicago proper because they would run me out of the city. I know. Oh, yeah, they will. They will. No, the stand operator will throw it at you. Do you all know Portillo's? They're moving around the country. Portillo's, right? They're opening, like they're in Arizona now, in Tucson. Yeah. So anyway, and then I think they're opening in Texas too. The guy started with a little hot dog stand, smaller than the sewing machine cabinet, and now he's got there's a chain. He's long gone, but there's a chain of restaurants. So if I want to join those 2. I can use, how many of you have seen or done when you learn to sew, using a zigzag to join 2 pieces, and then they do this? Nurses, the scar? A nurse will tell you, honey, you're punching this with both sides of the opening with a needle, and you're pulling on thread, it's going to leave a scar. Right? So, no surprise there. Physics. I shall not argue with physics. Right? So, I'm going to do this with a zigzag, and the regular zigzag will do just fine. I'm going to do half down, and then I'm going to go to what we call a gathering stitch, and I'm going to just finish with that. Actually, I can make it a little longer. All right. This stitch, you'll see, does something a little different. All right. Number 12. That's called stitch bingo. So, here. Do you see the scar? Do you see here it's flat? Ooh, ah, it's the machine, right? So here's the deal. It's physics. You release the stress before it has an impact. So you do a zig on one side, come back to the center. Then it takes one stitch forward in the pit, in the nothing, in the air. That releases any stress that was on that zig. Then it takes a zag and back. And then you can go from there. So let me show you a good application for this. Oops, oh, well, good. This is felt, right? We do felt, well, it's a good stand-in also for batting pieces you would piece together, right? But you put batting in a kit and you start bashing them into a box and you got fluff when, when you're done. So I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna go back to the stitch the way it was, okay? So stitch length was 0.7, it's just the way that stitch is programmed, okay? And here we go. So I'm going to do this. It's very short. I'm going to do half with this, or about the third, let's say. Then I'm going to increase my stitch length to 1.2 because that's in the cookbook. And how do I know this? I played. I played with my feet. Okay? Do you see my finger here? Just let it go. I hate that song, but it's a good theme. I was lucky. My son didn't like Barney. Woo, woo. His mother and I were like, he liked Magic School Bus. That's a good show. Okay, so here. This, no scar here because this is felt. On batting, it would be okay. But look, this is a little more diffuse here. It still joins. You see, this separates a little bit. You see it? This will not. All right, let's talk applications. Well, the short stitch means you're zigging, relax, zagging and relax, but very close quarters. So it's like a lot of links coming to the middle, and so it's very strong. Okay, so if you wanted to put two pieces of canvas or faux leather, or real leather, whatever together, and you want them to be like good, as the Swiss would say, good and tight, you can make it ironclad, right? But if you want to, let's say, join batting together, right? We have a joke. How many of you have a 990? Okay, the stylus here, right? The stylus now, I like what they did. They put the magnet only here. So now you don't need to grab it. You slide your finger and it comes into your hand. But for $23,000, new cat toy. And now for $23,000, you can save $23 on betting. So how many of you piece batting together? You might make a mug rug, a little something, a present for somebody, housewarming present. You want to do placemats? They're great. Okay, or pot holders for that matter. I like. You all quilt? Pretty quilt heavy. If somebody wants to learn how to quilt, tell them to make a pair of pot holders. My mother, depression baby, my ex-wife and I had made pot holders bigger than full size capable, and gave them to her like 30 years ago. She died last year. They were still brand new because those were a present. Depression babies, right? They were still, I said, oh, did they work? But I said, no, you don't understand. Those were a present. Okay, never mind. Because we found stuff in the house like this that she could have used. It was for her to use, but she never used, okay? Yeah, that was, yes. Remember the Sunday dishes, right? There you go. All right, so with batting, I would use a stitch like this. But with batting, if you do the short stitch like this, you'll see a matted down ridge forming, and you'll feel it. So you do the more open one, it will blend into the batting. If you want to join batting together, like, you could why buy a crib size batting package when you could just put together scraps? Make sure you don't fold your batting when you rotary cut because right? I've done that. And my father was a carpenter, ebonist. Like, I should have known better, but you don't stack the wood for fancy cutting, right? So anyway, I'm lucky. My father and my mother both. My mother sewed, my father cut wood. You measured 3 times and before you cut, right? Regardless of the tool. And my son was raised that way too. So you would open up the stitch longer, and you would use a finer thread. Most of you use natural unbleached cotton batting most of the time. Okay, buy 1 cone of serger thread. Do you carry the Mettler serger thread? Okay, so the natural, what they call it natural, which is funny because polyester has to be tinted. So it's natural polyester. Serger thread is finer. it will not build bulk into the seams. It will disappear in the batting. And you wind a bobbin with this, you put it in the needle, and you can, it's also, serger thread is very good for blind hems. It's a little finer. So it puts less bulk into that hem. If you,
it wasn't as strong.
yeah, but this, you don't need strong.
But you just said blind.
Blind hem, okay, the natural blind hem, when you buy a skirt and all that, it's a monofilament, basically.
Yeah, and they fall apart.
Yeah, so it's stronger than that. Yeah, no, it's strong enough. Well, it's strong enough. If somebody's getting into your hem to the point of ripping it, you need to smack him. Yeah, but silk thread, you have to find it, and it's more expensive, yes. But yeah, no, silk thread is like, mwah. Yes. So serger thread is great for those batting applications, okay? So that's for, so you can go, now applications for this. Let me show you a stitch. One of my favorite. It's on all the Berninas pretty much with at least the large touchscreen. So it's a quilting stitch, and it is stitch number 1340. I know the number because, once you find something you like, you remember the number. So this stitch, and I'm going to make it a little longer, this stitch looks like a chevron. So let's say, how many of you have done crazy patchwork or like pillows, like crazy stuff, like, canvas to leather or faux leather and suede to canvas or whatever, right? I like that look. Well, if you're going to join those, you do it on the flat, right? So you could use tape join them with tape, cut and join. So all taped together from the wrong side. You can use blue tape because it's going to get stitched, right? So blue tape, the tape will stay in there, I don't care. Nobody will see it. So then you flip it, and now in those ditches, you use a stitch like this one. That becomes a truss, trussing pattern. That's my father's side of the family. It will literally create a superstructure that now, it's almost like stained glass when you're done, right? You've created a structure. You could use a contrasting thread. You could use upholstery thread. If it's all dark colors, like dark blues and navies, you could use a yellow thread, a white thread. Your stitching becomes the opposite of blending it into a batting. It is now a standout feature that you want it to pop from across the room. And this stitch, because this machine has a stitch designer, I could take this stitch to the stitch designer and literally make it triple. So if it's not, right? So then it would pop even more. And I would use, all those big projects, use embroidery thread. It's 40 weight. It's a little heavier than your sewing thread. And it glides in beautifully because it's polyester. It's meant to go at high speed, high density. So it glides beautifully into the project, and it will pop when you're done. You can go shiny or less. Right? You can go tone on tone, you can go whatever you want. And there's a bunch of stitches, you look at all these stitches here, that will not join very well because it doesn't follow a center line, right? It would prick into your layers. You have to be careful. But anything that is center line, I really like this one here, but there's others that will go center line and will decorate on the sides if you want. So any of those big machines today, any brand really, I call them big box of crayons. How many of you had crayons or coloring pencils as kids? I don't think, do they still do coloring pencils? Okay, so there was a brand in Canada, surprise, it was called Canadiana. And we were poor, you were lucky you got the box of 12, right? And then we discovered, damn, there's a box of 48 and then 72. Oh, there's a world out there. when I heard Wally singing that, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I know the song. So when I bought my first box of 72, I was a paper boy from age 10. I could afford to buy stuff like that. And it took me a while to use all those colors. Right? Some of the colors, like what they call skin, flesh, it was very pink. It was totally racist back then. But not only that. No, it was pink, but it was pink like, honey, I think you spent too much time in the radiation chamber. You didn't read the warning about the x-rays. It was a kind of a glowy pink. Like, if you had olive skin, nah, not me either, right? So, but it took a while, like some of the blues or, forest green and all that, it took a while to get there, but the first time I drew a little forest, there were 5 greens in there. So this is a big box of crayon. Any machine with like 1,000 stitches, right? This says only 3,000, but anything like that. The machine is not hard. Don't try to know everything the first week. It's just a big box of crayon. It will take you a while to get to all of it, which means it's a playground, right? It's a playground. How many of you do this by obligation? Good. We don't need to call a psychiatrist. Well, you have to for your own fun, though, right? It's your Zen zone. right? So it's, it should be enjoyable. You should have a good machine that feeds well, use the right materials, reuse the right press of foot, and then you can go from saving $23 on batting to making whatever crazy projects you want, right? My quilts are art quilts. They're just stitches, embroidery, abstract, geometrics, all over the place. And I told you I was so fast, right? Well, no, I don't. I slow myself down, right? The little slider is my friend. I had one piece that went to Tokyo. And the workmanship on Japanese quilts is crazy. 980 little hexagons this size, all pressed and stitched by hand. Okay, you go like that. Yeah, well, I have a job. Well, actually, there's a social stratum thing. A lot of those quilters, high-end quilters, actually are married to executives like at Sony. It's a way to show that they have all the time in the world. Here it's like, give me the machine, it's me, right? It's more me. So anyway, that quilt had to be perfect, workmanship-wise. And I slowed it down. And it's all stitched in the ditch on a square sashing. And there is not one line of stitching that went like this. Not a micron. They all match to a T. Because the feed dog is so good, I let the machine feed the fabric, feed the quilt, and I let it do. I use a walking foot for the quilting and all that. But the precision is there nowadays on the machines. You have to make sure you let the machine do its thing. Don't oversteer the fabric, right? Let it do its thing. The finger, and let it take the fabric from you. That's the key. If you learn one thing today, that is the key. And when I do the boot camp, I'll walk behind somebody and I'll pull their hair back. Let me breathe down your neck now. You're not doing it right. And they catch themselves. So that's for joining edges. It can be functional, it could be scrappy, and it can be decorative all the way. Right? And I would use a dual feed foot for this. And if it's really, really heavy stuff, you can use the walking foot. Now, the walking foot will tell you that, the reverse motion, they tell you to use a stitch length of no longer than 3, right? For the reverse stroke. Who's used it to all the way up? You just slow down if you go beyond 3. If you're off label, you take your chances. It still works. You just have to slow down a little bit. So next, I have what I have. Yes. Oh, where?
Sorry. Some of us in the back here, we didn't hear what you said about use embroidery thread.
Yes.
Things other than embroidery.
Oh, all the time. My jeans are hemmed with embroidery thread.
What's that?
My jeans are hemmed with black embroidery thread because I wanted the triple stitch effect. And I just use that, and it looks like the factory the heavy stitch, heavy thread, but it's much easier.
And you were saying some other things we didn't hear.
Well, if you want to join, scrappy patches with a bridges stitch like this, you can use that as well. Yeah, you want it, top stitching on a tote bag. There is okay. How many of you like the look of that upholstery? Look like the car stitching. When it's real. No, it's not like in a Corolla like I had molded into the rubber. When I look at that, I says, should I get the seam ripper? You go back to the dealers like, it's not real stitching. That would be funny. But anyway, you like that look?
Yeah.
Here's how you reproduce it. It's completely counterintuitive if you look at the stitch catalog. It's a smocking stitch. Remember smocking? You pleat the fabric. It's a quintuple straight stitch. Bernina people, right? Bernina stitch bingo, write the number down, 713. That stitch is on a lot of machines, pretty much every brand of machine now. It's a quintuple straight stitch. My next quilt is going to be called the warp and weft of the universe. And it's going to be like a portal that forms with embroidery colors. But the stitching, the quilt stitch, will be quintuple stitch at 30 degrees this way and in horizontal. That will be the warp and weft of the universe. It's an astrophysics graphical rendition that I saw that I want to recreate in thread. But I'll use this for quilting the quilt. Now, the quilt shows don't get my quilting that way. It's not traditional. I don't do traditional period. But anyway, you can use that. It flows well. It shows well. So if you want your stitches to show, edging straps on the tote bag to reinforce them, use a triple stitch and use the needle and bobbin. It's sturdy. It's polyester thread. It works really well. Yeah. So you'll get that upholstery look without the fuss. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
And what foot was it for the joining?
Number 10.
I mean, stitch.
Oh, the stitch? Oh, for the big pieces? 1340. You have a Bernina?
Yes.
Okay, which one you have?
5, 7.
Okay, you probably have that stitch, 1340. Look for it. It's in the quilting menu. The 1300 stitches on the quilting menu. Yeah. Otherwise, fish around. Make sure there's the stitch has a line in the center. It will work better with those. Yeah. Now, if you tape first, you probably loosen the tension a little bit. Remember, it's a decorative and structural. Loosen the tension so it wraps under. Then it won't force the pieces together too hard. Yeah.
Okay.
Run a test. Yes.
I'm sorry, you've said it several times, but again, the joining stitch that you use after the zigzag?
Yeah, the 1340.
Well, no, you
No.
used another one.
Oh, after the zigzag, that was number 12. Yeah, that's called the gathering stitch. They used to call this the faggoting stitch, faggots being bundles, and then they changed the names along the way to gathering stitch. And if your stitch is too wide for, let's say, a handkerchief linen, it will gather it, all right. It will pinch it in the middle. Always run a test. And be careful of starching a fabric and running a stitch, and it looks good. And then you wash the thing and go like, what happened, right? Because the starch will prevent things from happening, but with a bit of pull after washing, it may pucker a little bit. So, always run a test first. Okay? So, good questions. Yes?
I don't understand. Can you explain the difference between dual feed
Yes. And a walking foot?
and a walk?
Do I have a video for you? No, actually, on Facebook, Bernina USA, right, there is a series called Sewing Tool Tips. We started during COVID. That's when I was first allowed to do my videos, 24 years later. So they used to call it the Sylvain show. There's more people on there now. So, but no, if you go to Bernina.com for yourself, if you have a Bernina, right, learn and create at the main section at the top. You'll see there are webinars and recorded webinars. So here's the deal. Any machine has a dual feed. It's from the top. It matches the tiny little pad at the back of the foot, right? It really matches. There's a tiny little pad at the center back of the foot. So it's good, it helps, but it's after the stitching point. It helps, especially when you start, but it's after the fact. So if you have a foot on batting, I do an example where I do a quilt sandwich. I use dual feed. And you have the skis at the front, and you see the ripples in the water forming in front of the foot. And then you see a ripple in front of the foot because of the batting, because the batting wants to smoosh forward, right? Because of the foot dragging on it. So when you're done, your backing is here, your batting is here, and your top fabric is over here. You have a nice, what I call, in New York we call that a smeared grilled cheese sandwich. When you're not careful, then it smears off. That's what you get with a dual feed on a quilt sandwich, right? So with the walking foot, here's a needle point. Picture the nose is my needle point. You have the two pads on the front. They come here, before, at, and after the stitching point. So they control everything. And then they let it out the back. Okay? How many of you have used a foot and stitch on the binding? It's great for placemats. Well, you stitch on the binding. It's sturdier actually, and it will get washed, and it'll survive the wear, right? But when you stitch on the binding, you end up with a tiny little diagonal ripple. Yeah. Yeah, if you look carefully after the wash. Go home at lunch and bring one. No, just kidding. So you'll get that tiny, because what happens is that you have your 3 layers of the quilt. If anything goes on the table, I don't do a bed binding. I do a self binding. Okay, this afternoon I'll stitch a self binding because that's flatter on the bottom. It stays on the table flatter. So, but if it's a self binding, you go from 3 to 4, 5 layers. So you have 5 and 3. If you do a attached binding, it's 3 to 7 layers. You have 1 toe of the foot on the 7, 1 toe on the 3. There's more drag here because that's a loaded burger. That's a grilled cheese, right? So the burger is going to drag under the foot more, and it's going to take that binding and shear it a little bit as it goes. So with the walking foot, those 2 pads, I don't care whether it's a grilled cheese or a burger today, you and you both are coming at the same rate. So it will keep it more even. So you need both. Right? You need both. And here's when I was in marketing, I'm the one who coined the slogans for the ad agency. My brain is a word Cuisinart. So the dual feed is 5 times the convenience because it integrates in a dozen pairs of feet and it enhances those feet immediately. But the walking foot is 5 times the performance because it's 5 times the surface area from the top. So my last quilt weighed 20 pounds. And when I rolled it and I had to do a stitch in the ditch, picture 59 columns and 80 rows of a dot matrix in cross stitch. And I have to crisscross the stitch in, between all of those. So I have the quilt, and with a walking foot, I could feel that 20-pound quilt go tug, tug, tug every stitch of the way. So that, that's how good it is. It really hauls. So you need both. If you have a machine with dual feed, you still need a walking foot. Yeah. Next, I'm going to couch a ribbon. I'm going to couch a ribbon. And let me see here. 39. 20D. All right, 20D. All right. So I'm going to use a satin stitch foot. It has a channel underneath because this will ride over the ribbon and not drag into it, right? So that's good. That's number 20D. And I'm going to put that on. Engage dual feed right away. And then what I'm using is, you would use whatever your base material is. I'm using muslin here that is not especially thick. That's kind of asking for it. So, living dangerously. I'm going to use a stabilizer. I don't call these embroidery stabilizers. This is a lightweight tearaway. It's stabilizer to me. I use it all the time in all sorts of places, right? So I'm going to use this. At home, I would always spray some temporary adhesive. You carry a 505 here? Yeah. Okay. Do you know where 505 came from? The fashion industry in Paris, the French company. The lady would wear a unitard, and they would literally spray the unitard so they could drape the fabric and it would stay put until they're ready to pin it off, right? So and they've changed the formulation in the last few years. It doesn't smell almost anything anymore, and it's more a finer, more even spray. I really like it. So I would, and when you spray, always spray the stabilizer. You don't want to junk up the fabric, and then always apply it to the back. And if you need to smooth and press things, the layers together to adhere them, always do it from the papery side, the stabilizer side, so you don't stretch your fabric, right? Because if you stretch the fabric and you stitch it, it will stay that way, right? You'll have puckers. So I am going to put this down. So always, for embroidery or any applications, I would put my fabric right side down, right face down, and then I would apply the 505 or whatever adhesive, temporary adhesive to the stabilizer. And what I do is, in miniature version here, I let it roll out from the center out, right? And then I smooth on this side. The fabric will only receive up-down pressure. It will not receive lateral stress. So you will not stretch your fabric. If you want to do anything on knits are wiggly and they stretch and all that. So the way I do it is you pre-shrink the knit if you have to, and then I will put it flat on the ironing board, and basically not stretch it. Just put it flat, maybe press it a little bit if I have to, and then technical term, starch the heck out of it. 2 or 3 rounds, and actually works if you need to, like embroidery on a knit. Like a T-shirt, if it's going to be rewashed before you give it away, I will use, what do you call that? Sizing, laundry sizing. That's even crunchier. That will turn that knit into a piece of cardboard, and then nothing stretches. Otherwise, any of you embroider on knits, like stretchy knits, like spandex knits? Okay, so my late mother-in-law, no stress, no pressure, goes to needless markup. She buys a very nice mock tee, wool, merino wool, spandex, mock tee. Would you embroider a little whatever it was she wanted on it? And this is our first embroidery machine, 1997. I don't even have my professional highlights on yet. I'm like, sure, ma. So anyway, the way you do it is there's a stabilizer called fusible polymesh. It's not a permanent glue like the Shape Flex. It's not a fusible glue. It's really a cornstarch-based glue, so it's reversible. You can unfasten, you can release it afterward. So I cut a piece that's oval in shape usually. If it's a name, just bigger than that. If this, I would put a cutaway on there. Fusible polymesh is a lightweight cutaway. And if it's a small embroidery like an outline, something on a knit, that will work. And then you fuse it. Then I will use a tearaway. In the hoop, full hoop. So that way there's something stabilizing the whole stitching. But the tearaway goes away, and then the fusible polymesh, I will release when I'm done, peel it off, and then leave about a 1/16 of an inch halo. And I use, the little tiny thread snips, right? I use those to trim, because you can follow that, that even in 2 letters and stuff like that. Leave only a 1/16 or at most an 1/8 of an inch, you'll never see a halo on your embroidery, okay? So Ma liked it. I called her Ma. She liked it. Survived that one. So that's for that. And there was one more thing I wanted to mention on that. I might come back later. All right. So, oh yeah, there's this, when you embroider, do any of you embroider with just a tearaway sometimes? Okay, be careful. All right. Let me give you a very scientific formula. Tearaway plus H2O, that's the sciencey part, equal mush away. That's the practical part. So tearaway will disintegrate in a wash. So it's good for adding, structure and stability at stitching time. It's useless after that. So anything that needs to survive water needs a cutaway. Cutaway is permanent. Okay, so I'm going to put a ribbon down on this. And I got my trusty little, I love the purple dries white. This is water-based glue. This is wicked stuff. It's hard to find now. They stopped, the company pretty much stopped making it. It's about a quarter inch grosgrain ribbon. Grosgrain means coarse grain, right? Now you can get silk ribbon, which works well. I did like grosgrain ribbon, but if you sew on the grosgrain ribbon, it's like stepping on garden snakes. It wiggles like crazy. So I'm just going to do like, you've all waxed a piece of thread at some point, right? Least favorite part of my quilt is putting on the label. All right, there you go. Slide that there. Put that down. If you don't glue your ribbon, you're asking for trouble. This, guess what? I put the ribbon down. I'm going to flip this over and still press it from the other side so I don't stretch my grosgrain ribbon stretches. And it stretches unevenly. Double the fun. Right? So I'm going to put this in the middle here. And if you have, actually, this foot is wider than what I have here. I'm going to use my freehand system. What I like of the Bernina one is that it has a steel cable inside. So if I nudge just a hair with my leg, I get just a hair here. If I nudge all the way, I get all the way. It's not just an up and down. It's controllable. So that works well. I'm going to go to my stitch here, which is in the decorative stitch menu. And I'm playing Stitch Bingo 309. So these are nice geometric stitches. They would be great. Look at that for couching ribbon. This one. This one. Do you see that? Now let's show it on screen. One thing, I don't know if you play with that on your 990, those of you who have one, but one thing I like here is that when I see this, if I'm, let's say, composing letters, writing a saying or something, I may not want to see the foot. So I'm going to pick up my correct foot for this one, 20D. But if I don't want to see the foot, I go to the view menu and I say, don't show the foot for now. I just want to see what I'm stitching with, right? And this is going to be a trim. It's always going to sew this way, although this machine could sew it sideways, but it's harder to guide sideways. Eventually, you're going to hit the end of the tunnel, right? Even though it's 14 inches, you're going to sew it this way. But what if it's meant to go a trim on top of a Christmas stocking, right? This way. Right? So you can tell the machine, you know what, show me the stitch the way it's going to be when I'm done. So if it's lettering or whatever, or a flower and a vine and a leaf and a whatever, you can actually show it the way it will look at the end. It will still sew it this way, but you can visualize it. So the nice thing about bigger screens nowadays is you can preview what you're going to get. So I'm going to put this back. This is where my stitch is supposed to look. It's at the maximum width already for this machine. And when I couch something, whenever you increase the amount of material under the foot and under the needle, it's generally a good idea to lengthen the stitch just a hair. And those of you who do garments, it's called feeding the seam, right? If you do more layers, like you get to the belt loops on the pants on the jeans, you're not going to do tiny little 2.0 stitch length. You're going to lengthen that stitch. It needs to bridge over that bulk. So here I'm adding bulk with the ribbon, and also I want my stitch to pop a little bit. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it as is at first because 7 years of grad school, second thing I learned after eliminating variables is test. Embroiderers? Yep. Everybody, right? You've heard it, right? There's two types of embroiderers, the ones who test and the ones who wish they had. It works for sewing too. The garments you wear today, they were sewn, unfortunately, in a factory, most likely, right? And by a person who does the same one seam all day long. It's got to be mind-numbing. But before that garment started sewing on that machine, a technician went through, put the proper needle, proper plate, tested the stitch length, and optimized that machine, that seam for that, that machine for that seam, and then it's done. You ought to do this. But if you do a garment at home or a project, you have the advantage of you're doing all the seams, only once each. Well, you do one zipper, you do one shoulder seam, you do one arm size seam, and so on, right? So you're going to have to test on some of those things. When you test, though, on representative quilters even, if you do a new block, test it. And if it works, Test it on, write on it. Use, scrap solids, test it and write on them. I don't use the fine Sharpie for writing on fabric because it blots. I will use the Pimentel, the pigment, for fabric pens. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with this stitch, and I'm going to do this. We're gonna go productivity mode. And look what I'm doing with the fabric. I'm just putting my hands down and letting them corral. Okay, so keep going. So if I stop here, I'm going to lengthen that stitch a little bit. Well, like a little bit lot. And then just to see the difference, and you'll see something. And see, I put my ribbon on the side here. My fabric's uneven, the drag's uneven. If you do a trim, try to center things and trim off the excess when you're done. Right? You make the piece and then you cut it to size to fit into the project. Never try to do it on the pattern piece. That's asking for trouble. Don't ask me how I know. Okay, so that one is done. And I'm going to do a little something here. Let's see here. I'm going to triple that stitch. Now on the screen there was a little difference here that showed. Are we zoomed in? Go all the way in. Oops, a little down. You want to be here. Follow the finger. So this is when I tripled it. Do you see the stitch got bolder? I called it bold for my stitching. Okay, so I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go. Let me reposition here. There you go. And I'm going to even go back to the regular stitch length so you see how much that does. And that muslin, you can tell, is buckling. It's way too thin for that kind of material. I would have probably put a tape or something on a shape flex underneath to firm that up, because I wouldn't. I do this on muslin because it's part of the kit. It's easier. Okay, we're good here. So when you're done here, and those of you who have a Bernina, you'll notice that the thread cutter on the 990 and the 790 Pro, it doesn't take a stitch sideways or forward anymore. It stays on where it was. So that's nice. Okay, so here, this trim is almost ready for honeycomb. All right, so and actually that stitch is great for that. So here you see the stitch is on top and it's hiding the ribbon a little bit. When you open up the stitch, notice you see the ribbon more showing through. And then if you go back to short with the triple stitch, it gets denser. So there's different results you can achieve with this. Let's say you have a nice burgundy, your color, burgundy velvet, what you're wearing, that very color, a burgundy velvet ribbon. And then you do this kind of isocord or embroidery thread, like this is Floriani, right? Embroidery thread with that kind of stitching. So if you do the stitch dance, then the ribbon becomes a backdrop to the stitch. If you open up the stitch, flat, silk, grosgrain, or velvet, then the ribbon comes through. And the stitch becomes a lattice kind of encasing the ribbon instead. So you can go from one effect to the other depending on what you want. And so what I do, I would take like a piece of heavy fabric, like something firmer than this, put the ribbon down, glue it, and then try the stitch, write down your settings, try the stitch and see what effects you're getting. And then, this is good for this is good for that. So you can go from emphasis on ribbon to emphasis on the stitch instead. So I don't use gold thread. My first gold thread ever, remember the sulky gold thread? that was says, oh ouch. Right now, sulky makes great thread. The embroidery thread, the rayon thread was very good. That thread was not thread. It was a filament. It was a metal filament. It kinks. It's nasty. This comes in very handy because the first stem here will loosen the thread off the spool. It might be kinky up here. It will bridge over. If you have a metallic, use the longer one. This will basically unkink it, and then it will come in tamed when it enters any point of the machine. So that if you don't, use a stand behind your machine, right, and place it even a little further out. That way you bring it in. When you use a stand outside the machine, you're adding a little tension. You may want to loosen your thread tension just a hair to compensate for that, right? It's physics. Can't argue with physics. They will spank you back. right? So that works very well. So I would use, instead of a metallic thread, although, do you carry yen met in the store?
Try King Star.
King Star? Okay, King Star is good too. If I want to go high speed, washable, no abrasion, no scraping, I will use an embroidery thread. There's colors that are close to gold. Yep, silver, like shiny gray, and I will use those instead. Now, Isocord, like Brent, I have at home, they had one called gold. It was a little brassy in my taste, color-wise. So I use a slightly lighter color, and it popped better. But yeah, pick a color you like. But always bring the ribbon and the background fabric. Your eyes, remember those? And they did this a lot in the 90s, early 2000s. I know in the subway, like in Montreal, there would be a white panel and some kind of design on a colored panel, right? And then when you look over to the white one, it was like, whoa, what happened? And you didn't smoke anything. Right? So like, do that again. So let's say you have a teal, bright teal, and like a chartreuse thread on a yellow ribbon, your eyes are going to play games with you. So bring the whole thing together so you can pick the right color. Okay? Bring a sample. Okay? Otherwise, yeah, color is messy in a good way. I love it. But it can get messy. So that's to emphasize that the same stitch on the same materials, you can get completely different results. And to me, it's playtime. It's playtime. So actually, I learned something. I was 15 years old. I was very young. I was watching TV in French in Montreal. And this old French guy, he was in his 80s, right? He was a French philosopher. Anyway, he said something, and like when you go like, he's onto something. He said we should rename the species. First, the whole taxonomy is sexist. It's always named after the male member, the inferior member of the species. But instead of Homo sapiens, the wise, the thinking hominid, we should rename our species Homo ludens, the playful hominid. Because he says, the day you stop playing, you start dying. And I was like, I'm with him. And it's been almost 50 years. I'm still with him. So to me, remember, it's a playground. It's a big box of crayons, and you play with it. And you do a trim, you say, okay, that worked. You can make a strip of that. And that could be a trim at the top of a pocket on the outside of it, between straps on a tote bag. See what I mean? I do an embroidery, and it was a test, and like, yeah, okay, I'll change this and this and that. That can be the inside pocket, when you do like fold it over inside a tote bag with a zipper, right? So I don't have enough time to play. I don't have time to make stuff. So I will use my tests as much as possible as recycled samples into something else. And people say, oh, what's that? It's like, oh, that was a practice run. I had a colleague, she retired from Bernina. She opened a quilting store, AKA she married her habit in the Quad Cities in Illinois, by the river. And she had a long, it was kind of a Victorian high-waisted, if you want, knit dress. And she wanted to make 3 quilt blocks, and she embroidered that and butchered it was a knit dress. Well, those were popular 20 years ago. And she butchered it. So she made the embroidery on a different fabric and reverse appliqued it into, and let's say my mother who has small bra cup, aced the test. She had an A cup, right? She was small breasted. So it still stayed pretty flat up here. And people say, oh my God, that's so cool. Where did you get that, the quilters? Oh, that was a mistake. She would go like this and then stick them out. And that's a mistake. And people would laugh and say, what do you mean? She recycled a boo-boo, like, you would cry, you just butchered a dress. She recycled it into a mistake. No, it's funny, but when she said that, I said, yeah, that was the best philosophy when it comes to doing your recycling your samples. I'm going to rethread here. I pulled my thread out. All right. Okay, so that was that. Now I'm going to do next is, this is funny. When I do this in class, I tell ladies, okay, I'm going to draw a straight line, so I'm going to use this. I need a straight line here. And this pen is about to retire. It doesn't like the sizing on the fabric. Here. There you go. That should work. Oh, you know what? Well, maybe. If you don't have stabilizer underneath, will it work? No, it won't. If you don't have stabilizer underneath, the grooves, on the Bernina tables, the grooves are every inch. You want to do a 4-inch hem, 4-inch hem on a curtain, whatever, it's right there. And then so you can actually use the grooves. But let me, this pen is definitely not cooperating. The big book of feet turn double. They should print a ruler on the edge. Thank you. All right. Oh, look at that. Let's do that again just because it sounds good. Okay. And then I tell my ladies, draw a shallow S. And I end up with this. I say, how do you drive? Oh, by the way, a third thing I learned in 7 years of grad school is that people drive like this. So I did 2 statistics minors and master's PhD level. And in 30 years of teaching sewing, I've never, ever had an exception. People drive like they sew and they sew like they drive. And I see people recognizing themselves. There's slow, medium, fast, and bat out of hell. And that's for sewing. On the road is batshit crazy. So I'm going to do a shallow S here. There you go. That would qualify as a shallow S. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to switch over, and I am going to do foot 39C. Remember I said that we had a second clear foot, right? With a satin stitch channel underneath. So picture this is almost, it's not an open toe. They put a bridge in the front. And the bridge in the front reinforces because it's not metal, right? So it reinforces it. There's a little hole. Oh, sorry. Let's do it here. Thank you. I don't have cameras in my sewing room. So it has a bridge in the front here that will hold the fabric down until you satin stitch or zigzag over it, right? There you go. I grew up in a family of 8. If you stood in front of the TV, 5 siblings would go, "Your father doesn't work in glassware." In unison, it was like a choir. All right, so this has it's hard to see here, but you see that slanted line? There's a satin stitch channel. There's a tunnel under that foot to let the heavy stitching glide through. And I do a lot of satin stitch with embroidery thread, right? Because it shows better. And it's washable. All right, this has, crosshairs. Love that. Decorative stitching, any kind, right? So if you're doing a decorative stitch, like, the leaf and the flower, the flower is nice and open, but the leaf is a little bit of satin stitch. And suddenly you notice that your leaves are a little draggy. They're not quite forming properly because the fabric was thicker and it's dragging under the foot more. Use a foot with a channel. That will and this little bridge over, there's a little hole in the front. You could put like a pearl cotton in there and, do a narrow satin stitch bead. It will raise the bead. We don't use that much anymore, but this will allow me to track. This will come in very, very handy in a second, okay? So, to take the foot off, super easy. Notice I'm not even looking at the foot as I'm doing that. I'm just putting it on, and then as soon as it's on here, I will latch it on. I'm going to change my foot, and then this is 34. You can dial the foot number directly, so that's what I do at home. 39, I said, rather. There's 2 versions, narrow and wide. You buy the one that matches your feed dog. That's done, and then I'm going to go back to my straight stitch. And voila, and then I'm going to move my stitch. Notice it remembers that last time I used my straight stitch was for edge stitching on that fabric, right? It's not position 3. So on all Berninas from the baby 3 all the way up, if you use the blanket stitch, and now you say, okay, I've applied this, now I need to do something else, sew another piece on, you go to a straight stitch. When you go back to the blanket stitch, it remembers exactly how you left it. So you don't have to do it again, and you don't make the mistake of, not doing it again, right? So I like that piece. So I'm going to do this. The stitch I'm going to use now is stitch bingo number 402. So in the decorative stitches, the folders are all numbered, basically 101, 2, and so on. These are what we call compact stitches, satin stitches, basically. And then 402 is a nice little wavy stitch. Now, when you sew this, eventually your eyeballs are going to go like this, right? So if you sew this and you don't pay attention, just on a strip, you may end up veering because it's sending your eye left and right all the time. So by having a guideline, now I can basically just start, and that little red marker will stay on my line. Now you're seeing it at an angle here. Remember the clock? From one side of the room, it's 11:58. From the other side, it's 12:02. So you're getting the angle effect here. I'm in line, so I'm okay. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to just stitch this down. So we're going to go for it. And even this kind of stitching at home, I would put my speed slider probably like 2/3 of the way in, and then go slower but go steady. And I'm old school. I still do this a lot. Like for anything that needs finishing, I will do this. Keep my threads so that when I restart, I can just hold my threads if I need to. Okay. So here, oh, this is nice. Actually, I should always use white thread. So this, do you see? Let me use a pointer. Do you see here? I'm more in line now. Am I? Am I in line? Okay. So I can see my line right off to the left of my stitches here, right off to the right of my stitches. My line stays exactly where it needs to be. But the line stays where I put it. The stitch stays. Self-editing monkey. The stitches are exactly where they need to be. There's no veering. Because here's what happens. You do this for a long stretch. So you sew this way. And you're doing like, you need well, okay, my in-laws in New York State, my mother-in-law was Italian. Her folks had both come from Italy. They were poor when they landed over in the 20s. She was raised by poor, immigrants. So at Christmas, they did not do Christmas stockings. They did Christmas burlaps, like giant bags. And I joked with my father-in-law one year, said we need to install a conveyor belt. Like you could actually re-roll the presents. It took 3 loads under the tree to get everything done with a big clan. They were like 6 siblings, and a lot of people. So if you need to do a trim around something like this, it's not 1 foot. It's like 3, 4, 5 feet when you're done, right? So you would do a length of this. It would veer a little bit. And if it's straight in, if it's lined enough, you say, okay, I can still rotary cut and make this my trim. But now you're slightly on the bias. And now you piece that on pure cross grain. They don't behave the same way. And then you have a little leftover or you fall a little short and you go like, what the heck? What's wrong with my machine? It's never the cutter. Right? Measure once, blame the machine twice. Right? So you might be off by a little bit. And you say, what happened? Well, it's too late to find out. So this would let you be spot on. And you're not looking at the needle. Right? If you don't have a guideline and a foot that tracks it, you're following the stitch and your eyeballs are trying to track that bobber going around. And after 2 minutes of that, your eyeballs are beginning to jump out of their sockets, right? So this is butter. You can do yards and yards and yards, because you don't do one Christmas stocking or one, it's one for everybody. That was me the first time I bought my Bernina, my sewing machine, to my in-laws for Christmas. Everybody needed embroidery on something. So anyway, this was nothing special. It's just the foot makes it possible. In this case, I needed the channel underneath for that compact stitch, that heavy stitch to go through. And I would have used a 40 weight embroidery thread because it would fill in and give you beautiful results. So another use for it is decorative stitching. Okay. So next, actually I didn't need the second straight line. I was just to enjoy the pleasure of drawing that line one more time. This one is called Baby One More Time. She's shaking her head, he ain't right, he ain't right. When I teach in the South, it's funny. After a couple of days, they'll say like, oh, he ain't right, he just ain't right. And I go, that's right. Your expectations will be met. Catherine is not saying anything, but she's not acting surprised, is she? All right, so following this line, I could do it with this stitch, but no, I want to, there's a little stitch 401, which is conveniently right next door to 402. See, so that stitch, and it's not a full width, but I'll leave it the way it is right now. This is a filled in. Bernina calls them compact stitches. They're satin stitches in American parlance. So I'm just going to follow the line. And this is where a dual feed foot would not help me. Remember that longitudinal tracking from the back means it loves going in a straight line. But I want to be able to go pretty much freestyle along curves. So this is where this one doesn't do dual feed, so that's good. But if you had a 34, for instance, you wanted to do this with a 34, the C would probably be better than the D for this, okay? All right, so now you can, if the line, if it's vanishing, or if it's not written on the fabric, you're just free-forming it, then I would just go, in this case, I would probably pivot my fabric. When I go around a curve here, oh my God, geometry. Remember the compass? If I take this curve, the center is about here. Well, my fabric is too small right now, but I would literally pin a finger down and use that to help pivot the fabric. Oh, I was looking, I thought you had a question. Usually I look at what I'm sewing, just saying. Okay, so now, yeah, tape down, yeah. Tape down with a busted pencil eraser as the safeguard on top. Yeah.
Now, we make attachments that already have that.
My highlights are honest. All right. There you go. Let me cut. Sorry, that was not what I wanted. This is what I want. All right. So this one, ignore the line per se, but the line will let you see. Do you see how well a stitch like this? Okay. Now, just planting seeds. Those of you, how among you have a 790, let's say 790 plus Pro or 880 or, God, it's Bernina bingo for sure. But like a sideways motion Bernina, the 7 and 8 series. You can use the multi-directional and then play with this. And on the 8 series and the 9 series, you can use what they call the Swiss are funny. We don't call it stadium lighting or runway lighting. No, they would call it like cool fluorescent lamp. Very sexy. It was the world's first surround lamp around the presser foot, so there was no shadows, but we call it CFL. And I'm born Canadian. To me, that was a Canadian Football League. It took me a while to adopt the wording, right? But anyway, they use engineering words because they're Germanic in mindset, right? They think it's, okay, Mercedes-Benz, instead of supercharger on the butt of a big, expensive Mercedes, what do they write? Compressor with a K. That's sexy, right? That's the Germanic mindset, if you want. They name it the way it is. It's the transparency. So this, that feature, the distortion on the 8 and 9 series, is basically drifting the baseline. You can actually make that stitch do an EKG just by turning the knobs and then feed the fabric straight through, okay?
You talked about the 34C and the 34D.
D.
Can you just use the 34D and not engage the dual feed?
Good question. Well, let's say nobody will arrest you, but I will give you my mother's look. It's my turn. She sounds like my mother, but I look like her. Well, she might take exception to that. All right. So if you have a D foot, well, let me take your regular D foot. The D foot has a chunk missing out the back. Oh, sorry. I'm not used to this. By tomorrow afternoon, last 5 minutes, we'll be good, okay? I promise. All right. So thank you. Remind me if I forget. I do not mind you reminding me. So there's a chunk of the foot missing here on purpose. It will be filled by this bracket here that does the feeding. If you don't engage dual feed, you have a partially amputated foot. And the fabric could flag before the stitch is fully laid down, especially on a long stitch, and you could get skipped or missing stitches. Us educators, when we first got dual feed, we thought we're smarter than that. You can sneak in the seam. And the texts were like, nah, verboten. You don't do that. So yeah, you want to use dual feed every time you put a D foot on. Okay. If you think you're going to use it for both purposes, 34C would work. Right, if you only want to buy one, 34C would work. But for most applications, like the straight down, like the big book of stitches, we used to call those stitch recipes. You know, you do parallel lines, you mirror the stitches, you can create some, you know those beautiful Ukrainian plackets, right? You could create stuff like that and then cut the piece and piece it into a garment, a tunic, or whatever you want, right? Or, you know, on a bag or whatever. So, but in the case, if it's straight down stitching, I would use the D version if you have access to it. Yes, good question. Good question. But yeah, if you use a D foot, you must engage dual feet. Otherwise, part of your foot is missing.
Lunch.
Oh, lunchy. Oh, I am now officially competing with food. Well, good, because I'm done. I can take a hint.